name is Tracy Sinclair. Welcome to Coaching in Conversation. Coaching in Conversation is a chance to discuss and explore not just how we can keep developing and maturing as coach practitioners, but also to consider how coaching is evolving and its future potential and place as a powerful vehicle for human development in today's and tomorrow's world. I'll be sharing some of my own thoughts on these topics, and we will also hear from some great guests from around the world who bring their unique experience and perspectives. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coaching in Conversation with myself, Tracy Sinclair, and this time with a wonderful colleague, Karen Dean. Karen is a master certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, who has been coaching for over 30 years. She has more than 15,000 client hours with many individuals, teams, organisations, all over the world in at least 22 different sectors. Karen is also a published author and has written a book called Stories, The Flowing and Falling of Being a Coach. And she has also created a concept called Me, My Coach and Me, My Team, which really aims at supporting the resourcefulness of practitioners and teams in a coaching process. Karen is also a wonderful human being, very creative, very compassionate, and very passionate herself, passionate and compassionate around the work that she does. I also had the privilege of talking to Karen, and she shared something about a very personal journey that she has been going through this last year, which she has reframed into what strikes me as an incredible opportunity for her own learning, her own growth. And she shares some of those things in this episode, which I really personally believe offer really significant wisdom to all of us as practitioners, but also as human beings. I've called this episode Utterly Present and Curiously Absent. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Karen. Thank you so much for coming and having a conversation with me today. I really appreciate it. And I know that we've already been talking for a few minutes, and I'm already noticing it. I'm excited for the conversation that we're going to have. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're really welcome. And I have to admit, I woke up this morning completely full of beans and thinking, wow, I'm going to have this conversation with Tracy. So that's super that we're in sync.
That's marvellous. Well, as we've already said before we started recording, we don't quite know where this is going to go, but maybe to start us off, I'd love for you to share a few words around what is it that brought you into coaching as a way of working, as a profession? What was it about coaching that's pulled you in?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of things from my background. So I'm a scientist by training and was a fellow of the Institute of Medical Laboratory Science. And then I had a complete change to work with Marks and Spencer for 10 years. And in latter days of that, I was chair of what was called the Corporate Marketing Committee. And my role was to influence all of the promotional factories in the business, whether that was for shop windows or point of sale, along with each of the buying groups that would be menswear, ladieswear, or whatever. And my role was in half an hour to get them all to agree what would be the face of Marks and Spencer on the high street and who was going to have priority at that time. And somehow I seemed to be able to do that and always come to a conclusion that was equitable, even if there was a tussle along the way. And I was at the end of a feeling of no longer wanting to be part of a paternalistic corporate hierarchy, but a real pull to be somewhere more entrepreneurial and therefore self-driven. And so I left and built from there a curiosity around influencing and really understanding how to connect with others and come to a better outcome, which of course resonates beautifully with coaching. And the more I wanted to explore the inside out, the more coaching was emerging as a space in which one could work and deploy a skill like that. And coaching's been my full-time commitment for over 30 years now, as coaching one-to-one with teams, and the last few years as supervisor. And it's been my passion throughout, and I'm no less excited, engaged and curious now than I was at the beginning, but it's quite a journey.
Yeah, yeah. And I can, as you're describing it, I can just see the energy in you as you're talking about that passion. Sounds just as vibrant today as it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, very much so. Having said that, I will admit to times where that passion and energy is dipped.
Mm.
And I think that's a natural cycle. So a phrase like, "Oh, I'm coached out," meaning, oh, can I just keep doing this? But that's often been for me on the threshold of creativity. So a time when something in me was building and needed to be refreshed. And I think ennui or boredom or feeling stuck is a time to build resources. And if we only look inside, we can find that energy has built there too. And there's then a choice as to where might I put this energy that I've been storing up. So I am aware that it's not always been on the up or always a high, but that there's a true flow to this. And I think it's a very natural part of each stage of our transformation.
Mm. Gosh, it's so interesting that you say that, because just coincidentally, of course, if coincidence is a thing, over the last few months, possibly even couple of years, I've noticed a slight sense of questioning and a lull in some of my energy,
Yeah.
of thinking, am I still as passionate and still as up for it, if you like, for some of the work that I'm doing? And I noticed that initially I was really chastising myself for that, for thinking, well, I ought to be more on my game. I ought to be ready and prepared and really living this dream of this work. And then I realized literally just the other day in having a conversation with someone that actually my energy was dropping for some of the more operational elements of my work that were taking up quite a bit of my time. And what was wanting to come through was more creativity, that there's a creativity, a change going on in me in terms of the kinds of things I want to think about or write about or do, that was being pushed down by so much admin or operational things. So it really resonates with what you're saying about this ebb and flow, and how sometimes that drop in energy could be something new that wants to come through.
A sort of sense of a threshold.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you said, I was struck by, you've said a couple of times there, that inside out element of this work. Do you want to say a little bit more about what that means for you?
I think when I began, I was outside in and very, the incisiveness, the specificity, the particularity of wanting to get it right. And I suppose we could label that as a sort of be perfect driver. And that's certainly something in me that has tremendous permission to just be good enough now. So I've evolved through that. But I began with an outside in, and then just realized that in the moments when I was touching what was deeper and inside the client, and in parallel in me, then something very powerful, profound, and more sustainable was happening. And I wanted to celebrate the flowering of the inside out, and to work in that way. So it was more me noticing what the impact was, or the quality of the conversation, or the resulting outcome, that became more and more compelling and encouraged me to dig a lot deeper. So I remember doing what was called sort of self-esteem training, and thinking about patterns of thinking and affirmations and language, and then moving through neuro-linguistic programming and doing master practitioner, and then evolving through that and noticing what were the principles from NLP that indeed I continue to hold, if I'm not going to just exactly be using at all times the processes that you're taught in NLP. But the beautiful way it introduces you to the thought, the language, the metaphorical nature of the way we are as human beings was a wonderful doorway to step through, and then to refine further through what we would now recognize as more competency, and through from skills to ways of being. But it was definitely a journey.
Yeah, and I noticed, that journey that you're describing, I noticed how in my earlier years as a coach, I was probably also very focused on outside, in terms of how do I perform better with my clients? How do I serve my clients better? How do I know more things, more skills, more certificates, more knowledge, whatever it might be, more. And one of the biggest learnings I had, actually, when I was trying to prepare myself for my MCC application with the ICF, was actually this realization that the development was me, was inside of me, as a self, as instrument, my being, as you were just describing, which I'd love to come back to in a minute. But something that you mentioned earlier could be really useful to explore here, is you talked about being coached out. And I know also that there have been some trends and some themes showing up in our profession around the world around burnout in coaches, and which is, as we know, quite prevalent in some of those professions that we might call the helping professions. I don't particularly like to associate the word helping with coaching, because I seem to think it implies our clients are helpless if we can help them. But if we're in that category of being in service of other people, there is often a high level of burnout, isn't there, in practitioners who are very much at the front line of supporting other people's well-being in some way. What's your perspective on that? You talked about being resourced and being coached out. And I know this is part of your work. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think being coached out, feeling burnt out, feeling overwhelmed, feeling lost are all states to be recognized. And if we're talking inside out, it may seem like a cliche, but truly the most valuable resource we have is ourselves. And in supervision, I hear often the desire to give, to be available, to be in service, to juggle so many things, even within the client base, never mind within the whole context of a coach's life, at the expense of the self-care. And I cannot stress enough, if we are the instruments of our work, we are the fundamental gift of our life. And in our growing and becoming more of who we are, and more purposeful, more available, with greater wisdom, with more to offer back out to the world, then it's so important that we we see all of our value and honor it and care for it. And I think that's been my most profound learning over this last year, for sure. And it's okay to be burnt out, take a step back and refresh, but truly listen to that inner voice. What do I need? What would be valuable for me? How can I honor myself? What would be the most respectful thing? What am I choosing? How do I reintegrate all of me? And it's work that we can't ignore, I believe, and it's a journey that our clients will be on, and we need to be, I believe, sometimes a couple of paces ahead of where they are, and from that still place of not knowing and yet having been curious and sought to truly value, then we're in a place where we can truly value our clients. And I love the phrase utterly present yet curiously absent as the characterization of coaching. And at all times in these days, my intention is to have what I call light touch effect. What's the minimum I can do that gives the maximum space to the client such that they have the deep effect that they desire, and that I'm bearing witness to that.
It sounds as though, or my sense is, with the way certain conditions are in our world right now, that this is an ever critical balance to strike. And I know, like you mentioned, supervision conversations. I've had conversations with coaches in supervision as well, very recently, several conversations where coaches are not only thinking about how can I be utterly present and curiously absent for my client, but also the fact that they are also, as human beings, at the behest of some of those challenges to their own well-being. And where is that line? I'm noticing some coaches having to navigate quite carefully that line between how much am I transparent and open and vulnerable to meet my client as equal human beings, to show empathy and compassion, and at what point does my challenges as a human being in our world today spill into that work where I'm then not curiously absent. You know, there's a fine line, isn't there, that this resourcefulness is so important. And I was just struck by what you said, we have to be 1 or 2 steps ahead. So that self-care as part of our preparation, or our readiness perhaps to coach, is ever more critical right now.
Yes, and I'm hearing the self-care, and I'm hearing vulnerability as a word that is resonating very deeply for me. And at this point, if I may, during this last year, I've been cancering. So as we're speaking, Tracy, I've just completed my 5th chemotherapy post-surgery for breast cancer, and I have my 6th and final one, yay, next Wednesday, provided my white blood cells perform. Otherwise, it'd be a week later. And what that's meant for me as a woman and as a human being and in my practice has been quite profound. Making a choice and seeking to understand what's the degree of disclosure I bring to my clients, because what might it trigger for them, and how might I maintain my potency, credibility as the coach, and still be going through something that was going to be very, very difficult and challenging. And it certainly has been. And I've had lots of different strategies for coping with what's arisen during that time. But what I found was I shared with every client that I was now on this journey, I gave them a choice as to whether they would like to continue working with me. And if they did, then could we agree flexibility around the diary, as I was unsure how the impact of the side effects of chemotherapy, for example, might be and what that would mean. And that takes some doing, when normally we're hoping to bring all of our way of being, but very little imposition of what's going on for us at the moment in the context of the boundaries of the coaching conversation. But to offer the vulnerability and do it lightly but authentically meant the outcome was wonderful. All my clients stayed with me, and I've shared with them what an absolute joy it is to suddenly find myself in front of a screen, because I can't meet one-on-one because of the immunosuppression, but to be in front of the screen and utterly engaged in what's happening for them. So it's heightened my capacity to be 100% in the space of the client, noticing, listening, being with. Even as I'm talking to you now, Tracy, I've got that sort of prickles all across my shoulders and up into my head, and that feeling the warmth in my chest, and noticing how my body's resonating with what I'm hearing from the client and in this conversation. And that has just become such a heightened awareness that I have, and I absolutely relish my time with clients. And I've paced it, and there are times when I'm saying no. And also this sort of, oh, should I be doing more networking? Should I be out there selling my business? What am I going to do? How am I going to get my next clients? How much posting shall I do? There's so much pressure. And those coaches are doing all of that, but I'm not doing much of that. What am I going to do? What if I don't get clients? So all of that internal talk and anxiety that comes, I've been able to make some profound decisions about how much specifically, whether it fits for my personality and style, is authentic to the way I want to be as a coach, and then sweep aside all other distractions and places where my energy may be more depleted or doesn't need to be placed, because I'm seeking to self-care and preserve. So that's just part of the journey for the moment. And I'm very optimistic. My cancer is stage 3, which means it was in my bloodstream. And but I'm really optimistic, and at many levels, it's a gift and a curse. But I will carry forward the gifts for sure.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I know this is it's a very significant personal journey, and there's such a lot of wisdom in what you've described here, Karen. One of the things that resonate, well, there's so many avenues I could explore with you now, because there's so much in there. But one of the things that really struck me by what you said was that we can sometimes think that if we have such a big personal experience going on, whatever that might be, we question, can I therefore still be available for someone else? And what you've just described is very beautifully, actually, is how not only, yes, I can still be available for someone else, but perhaps my personal experience enables me to be more available for someone else. And you made me think about a story that a friend of mine shared many years ago, who was diagnosed with HIV, was HIV positive, and became very poorly, had a brain infection, a brain virus that was triggered by the repressed immune system. And I remember him saying to me once when I was visiting him in hospital, and he said, "It's lovely to see you," because I thought maybe he was too tired. And he said, it doesn't matter how much energy I need for myself, there's always a pocket of energy for you.
Mm.
And I thought, gosh, that was just amazing at that time, and it just resonates with me, with what you're describing there, that there is something that you're holding for yourself in terms of your energy, but you're somehow able to have, I think you described heightened senses, heightened availability for someone else.
Yeah. And I think what has been brought in stark relief is that sense of, in the self-care, truly examining what is it to love me, to invite joy into my life, to understand the power of forgiveness, and to relish and celebrate the freedom that comes with that. A life lived with love, joy, forgiveness, and freedom is a beautiful life. And what that does is it flows through, it fills up your heart, it overflows and it flows out, and touches others, and then comes back to us manyfold. And I want to say that with humility, and know that this is my journey. So I'm making no assumptions or expectations or anything of anyone else. I can only describe how it's been for me. But though those things, and understanding sometimes that in service I was suppressing joy, or I'd forgotten how to find it in those days when I was feeling, as we were discussing earlier, more coached out, whatever it is. But it begins with love, and in that place then we can more deeply trust ourselves, and in trusting ourselves we can create the connection with others and encourage others to trust their inner guide to do whatever it is they choose to do and be in their lives. So that's is so clear for me now at the coming toward the autumn of this journey, and because we began in January with the diagnosis, and it will take me through to December.
I mean, so much wisdom in there for any of our coaching community out there that might be listening to this. I was just hearing so many life lessons that you're sharing there in terms of how we can try to engage and nurture ourselves. And this idea of love that you mentioned, it reminds me of when I trained as a counsellor many years ago before becoming a coach. There was a concept that we were taught of that was detachment with love, which really reminds me of the utterly present and curiously absent idea that there is an enormous connection, but at the same time a level of detachment, so that we're navigating that boundary.
Very much so, very much so. And in that inner conversation, for me, the idea of battling, fighting, winning, destroying what is my cancer, which has been living with me for I don't know how long, but is part of me, just felt dissonant. That inner conflict, to encourage that, just didn't feel right. So I gave my tumor a name, and her name is Molly. And Molly and I eventually got into some very lovely conversations, and she's guided me well. And in guiding me, my sense is dissolving, and responding to the treatment. So I felt I had a job to do with the doctors, with the chemotherapy, with whatever they were doing. Then we all had work to do together. And again, once again, everyone's cancer journey is utterly unique for them, and we must all make choices for how we relate and navigate. And for some, we have good outcomes, and for others, the outcome is death, and it's a serious business. But I'm sharing what my representation and orientation has been.
I'm so powerfully struck, excuse me, Karen, by that reframing that you've done of your relationship. You know, so many people describe battling with cancer, don't they? Fighting, destroying, battling, those kinds of words that evoke a very particular perspective or relationship with what's going on inside. And yet you reframed that to one of being alongside Molly and having a very different kind of relationship, which if anything is epitomizing a principle of coaching, isn't it? That we're inviting clients to reframe beliefs, reframe perspectives, etc. And I'm wondering, and then as you know, I'm fascinated by this idea of how can coaching as a way of communicating or being with self and others goes beyond a skill, goes beyond a set of competencies, or even goes beyond a profession. What are your perspectives now, given where you're at right now as a human being, a woman, a professional? What are your perspectives at the moment on what coaching could mean in our world, what it could become, what it could contribute? What are we working with here?
I think the capacity to connect, to develop a bond of greater trust, to share a space that's alive with curiosity, to create new and different ways of being, is utterly at the center of who we are as human beings, and is the very essence of what we set out to do in our coaching conversations. And I think we have an opportunity to amplify that natural talent in all of us, and use it wisely, and that we're very privileged to be encouraged to that degree of knowing, an invitation to connect regardless of whom we're speaking with, and within good boundaries and permissions and the coaching contract. No, there's a formality to the way we do that. But I think taking that capability and honoring it, signposting it, offering it, experiencing it, sharing it with others, means that we can build. The word waves coming to me, but it's like it's communication that comes in waves but creates an upward spiral, if that doesn't sound strange. And you know, increasingly coaches are finding very particular avenues down which they wish to travel and pay attention to the world in very well-defined ways, be it climate coaching or coaching people to understand how they're going to influence in minority, how we support and amplify the talents in neurodiverse individuals. So there are so many opportunities, but the absolute essence of this is how we connect with self and other. And it makes me feel so optimistic about what is possible, because in core skills of managing, in anyone leading others, in working in teams, we're in conversation the whole time. And if we were in a place where we were willing to offer our thinking transparently, able to do that with courage and vulnerability, and that we were seeking to be curious and honoring the other person, what might we achieve? and I believe potentially it's an underpinning to the growth of the human race.
Mm,
So
mm,
um, and we're at the beginning of the formality of that. But what I believe in is it's important that coaching, if it's being put out there as a profession, has the boundaries, has the contract, has the competencies, has the ethics, has the professional frameworks, and with those then we have freedom. So I'm a great believer in framework and freedom sitting together, juxtaposed, but absolutely. For human beings, when opposites come together, surprisingly, they're our most powerful moments. So I believe in the growth of the professional body and the desire to raise standards and for people to put themselves on the line and work through their ACC, their PCC, their MCC, whatever it is, to continually challenge such that we are healthy, whole, and appropriately in service of other.
mm. Gosh, that I'm holding that sense of frame and freedom, framework and freedom.
Mm.
It just reminds me of, all sorts of elements of psychological safety of the small child that has the framework of a playpen,
Mm.
boundary of a playpen to give them the freedom to play and explore safely within it. And that's kind of replicated, I guess, isn't it, in how we want to hold a coaching conversation. So this idea of framework and freedom comes up. It's paralleled in many elements of coaching, isn't it?
Yeah, 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 definitely. Um, I'm struck by a thread that's run through our conversation around, sometimes it's great and sometimes it's tough. There are moments when we know it's worked absolutely beautifully and we've been completely in flow. And then at other times, for some reason, we co-create with the other person something that's deeply uncomfortable for both. And of course, that's why I think increasingly the connection to supervision and the importance of building the muscle for self-supervision, for an inner voice to go, whoa, 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 there's something going off, off the rails here, and to be able to self-correct in the course of the coaching conversation, and then to dig deeper and be more curious and take to a reflective space, a journaling, and indeed, I built an online resource. The offering resources to coaches matters a lot to me. So that resource was me, my coach, so that we could self-reflect in an informed space online, creating the framework for a very deep conversation with self in order to go back refreshed and be really clear on what is it we wanted to take to the client next time. And I think also that connects to the flowing and falling. And my colleague, Dr. Sam Humphrey, and I wrote a book, Coaching Stories, Flowing and Falling of Being a Coach, to mark the stages through that 30 years of coaching, and times when it's been wonderful and times when I and Sam fell spectacularly, to be so disappointed and so sometimes disgusted with the way we'd behaved with the client and how it had finished up. But they are all moments of learning. Times of celebration are important to mark and amplify what's working, and times to be with that which we feel is more shameful. And I think it's important that we embrace both. I know I did a demonstration as an MCC coach with coaches who were in mentoring and questing for their next level of skill. And quite frankly, it was utterly appalling. it's one of the most dreadful demonstrations I have ever done. If ever I wanted to be pulled up short and learn, goodness me, that was not great. That was one of them. And it just goes to show that, you know, we're never going to be perfect, because perfection is not desirable nor attainable. But sometimes we then have to step back and learn, well, what was going on there, and how did that happen, and how is this the gateway to my next piece of gold nugget that's going to carry me through. So there we are. But we have an opportunity, Tracy, to continue to model, to encourage, to carry coaching in formal spaces and informal spaces, provided, of course, that we're not fixing or rescuing.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that you've been describing, Karen, seems so much in line with this philosophy that you shared of inside out, of, you know, really to be in service of someone else. It's not just about constantly upgrading skills, although of course that's a very important part of it, as you described, with the framework part and the infrastructure, at least for those of us who are part of the ICF way of working. We have that framework, but also this real emphasis on self as instrument, that the work that who we are and what's going on for us. And it does ebb and flow, doesn't it? It doesn't matter how many years of experience we have, how many thousands of hours of coaching we've done, we can still be slightly off one day, and therein lies our learning experience, if we can be open to learn but also compassionate with ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Compassionate with ourselves. I underline that one.
Yeah. Well, I could talk to you for hours, Karen. I just love these conversations, but I guess we're maybe coming to a natural pause. Before we close off, is there anything else that you would like to share for our listeners, that you feel would be useful and honouring of where you are right now?
I want to share my vision for where I'll take my practice, and that's in the space of team coaching. We are in such turbulent, challenging, unpredictable, sometimes terrifying times, and collaboration at the heart of what we need to do as we navigate really matters to me. An individual's voice being heard within the context of a group, our rights in the team to be part of something that is energized, is efficient, is engaged, is enthused. That state in collaboration with others, I think, is something so important. And I'm aware that team coaching is rising in need and responsiveness from the coaching profession. And I really want to put all my attention, having been in effect so isolated through this year. For me, it's how, as coaches, we're going to touch others in a safe and provocative and yet compassionate way that enables groups of people to come together and find their meaning and their motivation and their way of working, and be members of something powerful and purposeful. And so my vision and my work next year will be in the team space, and resourcing coaches to work in what I call the me, my team way. And that just leaves me with such excitement, Tracy. I'm so glad to be coming to the end of this treatment. and know there's such an engaging, lovely path down which I'm going to walk, and I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Well, I would encourage anyone listening to this to have a look at your resources, because having seen them myself, I know, and your book is beautiful. These are very important resources for our profession, and I have a sense that our profession is potentially coming into its own within rather challenging circumstances. So there's an enormous opportunity here, isn't there, for coaches to make an even more significant contribution and wave with an upward spiral, as you described it before, in society. So thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, Karen. I know that this has been a difficult and interesting year, that you have travelled in such an elegant way, which does never surprise me with you. And I hope that your final treatment goes really well, and I look forward to catching up with you very soon. Thank you again for sharing today with me.
No, thank you. I've loved our conversation. I really appreciate just having this space and time with you, and it's been a joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
You have been listening to Coaching in Conversation by Tracy Sinclair, a podcast aimed at exploring how coaching is a vehicle for human development in today's and tomorrow's world. You can learn more about coach training and development at tracysinclair.com and follow us on social media. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a rating and review, and also share it with your networks to help us expand our reach. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.